There's a lake in the Indian Himalayas that only shows you what it holds for a few weeks a year. It's called Roopkund. It sits high up in the state of Uttarakhand in the far north of India, at a little over 5,000 metres, about 16,500 feet, in a bowl of rock and snow between two enormous peaks. One of them, Trishul, rises to more than 7,000 metres above it. It's a small lake, a jewel of a thing, really. Seldom more than 40 metres across, only about 3 metres deep, held in the mountains like water in a cupped hand. For most of the year it's frozen, and there's nothing to see but ice and snow and the grey shoulders of the peaks. But in the short high summer the snow draws back, and the ice at the edges thins and clears. And when it does, Rupkund shows you what's been lying in it, and around it, all along. Bones. Human bones. Hundreds of them, skulls, ribs, thigh bones, whole and broken, lying in the shallows and scattered up the slopes around the shore. Estimates of how many people are up there run from more than 300 to as many as 800. And because the air is so cold and so thin and so dry, some of them aren't just bones. Some still have flesh on them, hair, nails, preserved by the mountain the way the mountain preserves everything it takes, slowly and for a very long time. The people of the region have known about the lake for centuries. The wider world found out about it in 1942 when a forest ranger climbed up to it and looked into the clear meltwater and saw the dead looking back. And the question he asked that day is the same question we're still asking more than 80 years later. Who were they? And what killed so many people in one of the highest, emptiest, coldest places on Earth? The strange thing about Rupkund is not that we've never had an answer. It's that we had one, a good one, that fit the folklore and fit the forensics, and then we looked closer and it fell apart, and what replaced it was stranger than anything anyone had imagined. We'll start with the ranger. His name was Harikishan Madhwal, and in 1942 he was patrolling in what's now the Nanda Devi National Park when he came to the lake. 1942 was the middle of the Second World War, and the first fear when word of a lake full of skeletons reached the authorities was a military one. The worry was that these were soldiers, that they might be the remains of a Japanese force that had somehow crossed the mountains, an invasion that had died in the high snow. That fear didn't last. It took only a basic look to see that the bones were far too old to be wartime soldiers. They weren't an army. But knowing what they weren't didn't bring anyone any closer to knowing what they were, because there were so many of them. And they were so far up, in a place with no reason for hundreds of people to be. No town, no fort, no farmland, nothing but rock and ice and the thin air of 5,000 meters where just breathing is work, and a night in the open can kill you. Over the following decades, from the 1950s onward, scientists began to study the remains properly, and they began to find things. The cold had done something remarkable to the bodies. Up there, decay almost stops. So among the scattered bones were skeletons with skin still stretched over them, with hair still on the skulls, with fingernails still in place, people centuries dead, held in a kind of frozen pause. And with them were objects, not weapons of war, not chests of trade goods, ordinary things, wooden artifacts, leather slippers, rings, bits of bamboo. The belongings of travellers, not of an army and not of a caravan that had been robbed. And there was the local legend which had been told in the villages below the mountain for a very long time. The legend is about the goddess Nanda Devi, who is the goddess of this whole region, the spirit of the mountain itself, and it tells of a king named Jasdaval from the kingdom of Kanauj, who set out on a pilgrimage into the high country with his pregnant queen Rani Balampa, and a great retinue, servants, musicians, a whole troupe of dancers. It was, in the telling, too worldly a procession for a sacred place. Music and finery and revelry carried up into the goddess's own mountains, and the goddess was angered, and she sent down a storm to punish them, a storm of hailstones as hard as iron, as large as, in the words of the old folk song, cricket balls or human skulls. And the whole party, the king, the queen, the servants, the dancers, was struck down at the edge of a small high lake and died there, and was left to the ice. For a long time, that was just a story, a way for the people of the valleys to explain the terrible thing at the top of the mountain. And then, in 2004, a major expedition, including work associated with National Geographic, went up to Rupkund, brought back around 30 of the skeletons and examined them closely. And they found something that stopped everyone cold. The way these people had died. A striking number of the skulls and the bones of the shoulders showed the same kind of injury. Short, deep cracks, compression fractures, the marks of rounded, blunt objects, not blades, not arrows, not clubs, striking the body from directly above, from the sky. There was no obvious weapon that made wounds like that, but there was an obvious natural force. Hail. Large hail. The kind of hail that forms in a violent, high-altitude storm, stones of ice the size of cricket balls falling from thousands of feet, hard enough and heavy enough to crack a human skull. The forensics, in other words, matched the legend, almost exactly. A crowd of people, caught in the open at a high lake, killed by blows to the head from above. Killed by a storm of iron-hard hail, just as the folk song had said for centuries. The radiocarbon dating pointed to deaths around the year 850, and for a while it looked as though one of the strangest mysteries in the world had a beautiful, satisfying answer where science and folklore had reached up the mountain and shaken hands. The dead of Rupkund were pilgrims, caught in a hailstorm 1200 years ago. Except they weren't. Or, not only that, not nearly only that. Because in 2019, a team of 28 researchers from institutions across India, the United States and Europe did to the Rupkund dead the thing that had never been done before. They read their DNA. They took genetic material from 72 of the skeletons and sequenced the whole genomes of 38 of them. They asked the bones the questions bones couldn't be asked in the 1950s, or even in 2004. Who were you really? Where did you come from? And did you all die together? The answer to that last question was no. The dead of Rupkund were not one group of people who died in one disaster. They were at least 3 genetically distinct groups, and they had died in at least 2 separate periods 1,000 years apart. One group, 23 of the individuals tested, had ancestry that sat comfortably within the range of people from South Asia, from the Indian subcontinent. These were the older dead. They dated to around the year 800. These may well have been the pilgrims of the hailstorm, the ones whose cracked skulls matched the legend. For them, the old answer might still hold. But the others were something else entirely, and 14 of the individuals tested had ancestry that did not come from India at all. It came from the Eastern Mediterranean, from the region of present-day Greece and the island of Crete. And one more individual had ancestry from Southeast Asia, and these people had not died around the year 800. They had died around the year 1800, a full 1,000 years after the first group. They were not related to the older dead, and strangely, they weren't even a single family or a single clan among themselves. They were a group of people of Eastern Mediterranean origin who had somehow come to be at a frozen lake at 16,000 feet in the Indian Himalayas around 2 centuries ago, and had died there and been left with the far older bones of people they had nothing to do with. The diet evidence backed it up. When the researchers analysed the chemistry of the bones, the older South Asian group had eaten a varied local diet, rich in the grains you'd expect. The Mediterranean group had eaten almost no millet at all, a diet that didn't belong to that part of the world. Ardoween Hani, the Harvard geneticist who led the study, put it plainly. We were extremely surprised, she said, by the genetics of the Rupkund skeletons. And that surprise is where the mystery sits today. Not in superstition, not in a folk tale, in a peer-reviewed genetic result that nobody has been able to explain. What were people from the Greek islands doing at Rupkund around the year 1800? There's no record of such a group. No expedition, no pilgrimage, no war, no trade mission that we know of that would put a party of Eastern Mediterranean people on that particular mountain, at that particular lake, at that particular time. They weren't carrying anything that explains them. They left no account. They simply climbed, for reasons we don't know, to one of the most inhospitable places a human body can go. And they died there, and the ice kept them, next to the bones of pilgrims 1,000 years older. So what is Rupkund? There are now 3 ways to hold it. And unusually, this is a case where the science has actually done some of the work for us. The first is the hailstorm, and for the oldest group, it may genuinely be the answer. South Asian pilgrims high on the mountain around the year 800, caught in the open by a catastrophic storm of giant hail killed by blows from above, exactly as the legend of Nanda Devi's wrath describes. Here, and maybe only here, folklore and forensics really do agree. The second is accumulation, that Rupkund isn't the site of one death but of many, spread across 1,000 years and more. Travellers, pilgrims and unknown others who died on that brutal mountain in ones and twos and dozens, and whose bodies the cold gathered and preserved until they looked, to a modern eye, like a single massacre. The DNA supports this strongly. It's the reading that makes the lake make sense. And the third is the one the DNA opened and couldn't close. The 14 people from the Eastern Mediterranean, a group with no story, no record, no reason we can find, dying at the roof of the world around 1800. That piece isn't folklore and it isn't solved. It's a hard modern scientific fact with no explanation attached to it, and it may stay that way. Rupkund is still there. It still freezes over every winter and thaws every summer, and every summer the melt pulls back and shows the bones again. A little more scattered each year, a little more disturbed, some of them carried off over the decades by the trekkers who still climb the hard route to stand at the edge of the skeleton lake and look down into the water. We know more about the dead of Rupkund than we've ever known. We know roughly when they died, in at least 2 waves 1,000 years apart. We know, for the older ones, roughly how. We know for the newer ones that they came from the far side of the world, from islands in a warm sea to die in the ice of the high Himalayas. What we don't know is why. Was it the goddess and her storm of iron hail for the pilgrims who came singing into her mountains 1,200 years ago? Was it just the mountain itself, patient and cold, taking travellers one at a time across 1,000 years and holding them all in the same small lake? Or was it something we still have no name for? The reason a group of people from Greece and Crete walked up into the death zone of the Himalayas around the year 1800 and never walked back down? The lake freezes, the lake thaws, the bones come back into the light for a few weeks each year and the peaks stand over them and Trishul catches the last of the sun. And Rupkund, which has told us almost everything, has never told us that.